2 barrels of oil in Fort McMurray. No civilization can survive long with that kind of ratio. And for Canadians not to recognize that is probably the greatest national folly that this country has ever been part of.
When we return, former Alberta Premier Peter Lougheed worries his tar sands dream has become a nightmare. The tar sands may be having a profound effect on Canada's environment, but governments and corporate headquarters still seem to be moving full steam ahead.
Paul Michael?
Sir.
Can we get a picture of you with the Premier?
Pushing the dream is the evangelist of heavy oil, Paul Michael Wiebe.
Premier, so nice to meet you, sir.
Here. Excellent. I'm looking forward to your presentation.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate it.
In town from Washington, D.C., Wiebe seduces newly elected Saskatchewan Premier Brad Wall to develop their own tar sands like Alberta, satisfying American hunger for friendly oil.
The oil sands are the foundation of a new economic force that's transcending even Alberta. The world is in economic and political transition, and the global oil market reflects that.
Companies like G-West and individuals like Paul Michael Wiebe, they're there to make sure that rapid oil sands development proceeds rapidly. Their job is to talk it up. Their job is to advertise all the advantages. They're there to grease the wheels. And they do a good job of that.
Now, in our opinion, the center of gravity in the global oil market is shifting away from conventional light to this part of the world that we know as Western Canada. And the nexus of that epicenter lies essentially on the Saskatchewan-Alberta border. And this is where the Canadians become the pivot on the balance of power in the global oil market. And Washington and Beijing and Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, are all looking at you.
Wiebe's words echo north, across Saskatchewan's boreal forest. Saskatchewan has identified 1.5 billion barrels of oil trapped under a 2,800 square kilometer piece of land. They hope deep-pocketed Americans will come in and exploit their tar sands, transforming Saskatchewan into a mini Alberta. But be careful what you wish for. Across the border, the Alberta tar sands are an economic free-for-all, with an average of 10 exploration leases granted weekly for the last 5 years.
There was no national debate about how fast we should develop the tar sands. And we'll just let the marketplace kind of decide who gets what and how much that they get. And so we just opened the doors and then, boom, the place exploded.
McMurray is a city that never sleeps. Clogging the roads is an army of workers that surround the town, living in camps or cars or flop houses, unable to afford McMurray's crippling rents. Transients lurk in the shadows, selling more drugs here than anywhere else in Alberta, juicing up workers for another day in the unforgiving boomtown.
Well, shifts are usually 7 to 7. But coming in the morning, we're in the lineup at Tim's and you can see how busy it is. So, kind of says it all.
En route from his trailer home to work, Andy Rudick hits the drive-thru early. Another morning in his 10 years up in the tar sands. With over $100 billion invested here, there's lots of work to be done and money to be made. Andy will be welding 60-inch pipe, pumping tar sands oil to the U.S. market, and earning him a 6-figure salary. But it can cost a fortune to live in McMurray, so Andy's left his family behind in Vegreville, 500 kilometers south. When you're stuck on site, it might as well be half a world away.
I work 20 days, I get 8 off. A lot of the guys that I've met are really good guys, so it makes it that much easier to be away from your family for 20 days. You spend more time with these guys than you do with your wife and your kids, so nobody really plans on being up here for 10 years. For the most part, it's a short-term fix. Every day you wonder, geez, another day, what am I doing? Every turnaround, that's another month gone that, life's just slipping away.
Andy's lost track of how many thousands of sections of pipe he's welded over the last few years, helping feed the tar sands boom. Under Premier Ralph Klein, Alberta slashed royalties and handed out development permits to almost anyone who asked, living for today and letting tomorrow take care of itself.
We have energy to burn, so to speak, and we're willing to share.
There are now 6 massive tar sands projects developing at once, with another 24 waiting to gear up.
And there's repercussions when you build all those oil sands at the same time, and you're bringing people in from all over the world and trying to handle it. The pressure isn't just in Fort McMurray, it's right across the province.
There's this perception both inside and outside of Alberta that it's raining money. There's a large portion of Albertans that are actually worse off because of the incredible inflation that this province is experiencing. And that applies to the high homelessness rates. We have the highest number of working poor using food banks. And people on fixed incomes, they're not getting cost of living increases. So their incomes are actually falling at the height of a boom.
It wasn't supposed to be this way. Once called Alberta's blue-eyed chic, Peter Lougheed nurtured the tar sands for years. He carefully limited growth and raised royalty rates, establishing a heritage fund with the windfall. Today, with the Heritage Fund no larger than when he left office 23 years ago, and development out of control, Lougheed worries his dream has become a nightmare.
The surface mining takes a huge bite out of the area. It's like stripping the topsoil off a farm. You do that and you've got to think about the future. People have to remember that the oil sands are owned by the people. They're not owned by the oil companies.
When we come back, alternatives from Norway to Newfoundland. The tar sands boom sweeps across the province of Alberta, sounding a lonesome refrain. With husbands away working in the tar sands, even nice family homes feel a little empty, especially for Andy Rudick's wife, Tanine, 6 months pregnant with their 4th child.
Last year he was gone almost 9 months. And if you look through our pictures, you can see when we went on holidays together, that's kind of when he pops into the pictures. He misses out on a lot.
Andy's briefly home for Thanksgiving.
I had a dream that Mom had a baby, and its name was Angelica.
Well, you know it's probably going to be another girl. I really looked forward to going home. My wife always enjoys it when I'm at home. Kids were ecstatic. My youngest daughter, she was born on Thanksgiving 7 years ago.
Thanks for us being clean? No, for us, me.
It's very challenging to be happily married when you're not together most of the time. It's hard enough being married when you're with each other all the time.
Same thing.
And it's, in effect, single parenting with a parent away.
Yellow ice.
Albertans coping with the downside of the boom may feel there's no way out. But as other countries show, alternatives do exist. Welcome to Norway's oil country. They do things differently here than in Alberta. Norway's ship came in when they discovered oil in the North Sea in 1969, changing their country forever. Stig Bergseth has been with Statoil for 34 years and intimately understands the company's gospel of contained growth. Norway established the publicly owned oil company in 1972, controlling the nation's resource and reaping the benefits of the boom. Stig returns from Alberta on a mission to buy into the tar sands. Statoil can afford to expand abroad. Instead of cashing in their oil lottery winnings, they invested in Norway's future.
One thing that was concerning us, that a country could get too much money and destroy its economy. And as you know, some years ago, we had a decision in the parliament to establish this oil fund, or what is now called the pension fund, so that most of the money coming in from the oil activity is kept outside the natural economy of Norway.
Rather than bust out, Norway matured gracefully. It's quietly grown into the world's second wealthiest country, and little Norway's oil fund is $380 billion, ensuring their progressive society will flourish for generations.
I'm not going to give you an advice to Alberta unless they come and ask for it. But in my experience, you cannot have resources of this size and have a successful development unless you have a good combination of public control and private enterprise.
By keeping control of its oil reserve, Norway has been able to compel their private partners to invest in research. They've perfected a method to capture and store carbon, reducing emissions by 65% at their offshore platforms. They plan to adapt their technology to work in Alberta's tar sands, the site of Statoil's future.
It will be the largest and single one most important project in Statoil's portfolio for the next decade.
Stig finalizes plans for Norway to get a piece of the tar sands. Is it yet another foreign invasion, or a friendly reminder that there's a different way to play the oil game? While the price of oil has increased 400%, royalties paid by Big Oil to the Alberta government have decreased from $3 to $2 a barrel. Albertans like welder Andy Rudick's wife Tanine are starting to ask if they're getting a fair share.
The royalties haven't been reflective of the vast amounts of money that the big oil and gas companies have been making for years. This is a very complicated issue that a lot of people don't have the time or the energy to try to find out all the details about, and that's where we look for a premier or a government to lead us in the right direction.
Higher royalties means more cash for the province, but Tanine is torn. Her husband Andy works in the tar sands, and Big Oil threatens massive layoffs if anything changes. Rather than risk a showdown, the Alberta government seems content to just tweak royalty rates. But as Newfoundland shows, it's possible to stand up to Big Oil, even if you're a have-not province.
I negotiate as Newfoundland and Labrador is the centre of the universe. And that's the principle from which I operate. I don't care if ExxonMobil are dealing all over the world. As Premier, I'm looking out for the interests of Newfoundlanders and Labradorians.
In 1997, Newfoundland started fishing for oil in the Grand Banks. And when ExxonMobil wanted to develop another offshore project, Premier Williams demanded an ownership stake and higher royalties.
I was heavily criticised right across this country from coast to coast to coast. Referred to as Hugo Chavez. But we just stayed the course. I wasn't prepared to just give it away.
Big Oil walked away from the table, certain that Newfoundland, desperate for work, would fold. But 17 months later, they accepted Premier Williams' terms.
Why should Canadians be second-class citizens, and why should we take less? And that's been my philosophy. And as soon as I was aware of it, I said, no, we're going to dig in here, and we'll wait. The asset is in the ground, and it's not going anywhere.
Doing it Premier Williams' way requires patience, and Newfoundlanders are in it for the long haul.
We're all bound away.
Like welder Jeff Wiscombe, they perfect their skills in places such as Fort McMurray, counting the days till they can return home.
I guess the longer you stay away, the easier it is to let go of your roots. But most people, I would venture to say, if I was a betting man, I would say 3/4 of them are planning on coming home eventually.
And we're all home to stay. Evermore shall there be smooth sailing.
Next, oil-starved China wants into the tar sands.